In the chaos of World War II, there were soldiers who followed orders. And then there were men who became legends. The Germans called him a nightmare, an unstoppable force who moved through gunfire like fate itself. Explosions shook the earth. Machine guns roared without mercy. Yet one lone soldier kept advancing. No backup, no retreat, just raw courage and an iron will. They tried to stop him with bullets. They tried to stop him with fear. But nothing worked, until the moment he faced 3 machine gun nests alone and changed the battlefield forever. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story, like this video, subscribe to the channel for more cinematic history documentaries, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support helps keep these forgotten stories alive. War does not create heroes from nothing. It reveals what was already buried deep inside a man. Before the battlefield knew him as a walking grenade, he was just another young soldier, one among millions pulled into the machinery of World War II. Born into a modest family, he grew up understanding hardship early. Life taught him endurance long before war demanded it. He learned to work with his hands, to endure pain without complaint, and to finish what he started, no matter the cost. When the war began, he did not chase glory. Like many others, he answered the call because his country demanded it. Training was brutal, unforgiving, and fast. There was no time for comfort, no room for hesitation. Recruits were pushed until exhaustion blurred into instinct. Those who broke were reassigned. Those who endured were sent forward. He endured. On the front lines, reality hit harder than any drill. The air was thick with smoke. Mud swallowed boots whole, and fear was a constant companion. Machine gun fire was not heroic. It was mechanical, precise, and merciless. Every advance was paid for in lives. Yet even among seasoned soldiers he stood out. Not because he was reckless, but because he was calm. When artillery thundered, others flinched, he observed. When orders came through chaos, he remembered them clearly. Fellow soldiers began to notice that when things went wrong, when communication collapsed and panic spread, he moved forward instead of freezing. This was not bravery born of ignorance. It was courage born of acceptance. He understood something early. Survival depended on action. Hesitation killed. Momentum saved lives. As the fighting intensified, German defensive lines grew stronger. Their machine gun nests were expertly positioned, overlapping fields of fire, dug into hardened ground, protected by terrain and precision. Entire platoons could be pinned down by just one nest. 3 of them working together could stop an advance completely. That was the situation his unit faced on that fateful day. Pinned down, trapped, losing men by the minute. Bullets tore through the dirt inches above their heads. Any attempt to rise was met with instant fire. Radio communication was cut. Officers were wounded. The attack stalled, and the longer they stayed pinned, the worse it would become. Retreat was not an option. Reinforcements were hours away, if they came at all. And that's when he made a decision no one ordered. He volunteered, not loudly, not dramatically. He simply looked toward the enemy fire, adjusted his gear, and moved. With only grenades and his rifle, he crawled forward, inch by inch, using shell craters and debris for cover. Every movement was calculated, every breath controlled. Above him, machine guns continued their deadly rhythm, unaware that one man was closing the distance. This was not madness. This was intent. He understood that destroying even one machine gun nest could save dozens of lives. Destroying all 3 could change the entire battle. The first nest was closest and the most dangerous. As he approached, the ground shook from nearby explosions. Dirt rained down. The sound was overwhelming, but his focus narrowed. When the moment came, he didn't hesitate. He rose just long enough to throw a grenade directly into the nest. The explosion silenced it instantly. For a brief moment, the battlefield changed. His fellow soldiers watched in disbelief as one gun fell silent. Hope flickered, but the fight was far from over. 2 machine gun nests remained, and now the enemy knew someone was out there, and they were ready. The silence from the first machine gun nest lasted only seconds. But on a battlefield, seconds can feel like an eternity. The German soldiers quickly realized what had happened. One of their strongest defensive points was gone, erased in a single explosion. Shouts echoed through the smoke. Rifles shifted direction. The remaining machine gun nests adjusted their fire, sweeping the ground more aggressively, searching for the man responsible. He was already moving. Without waiting for acknowledgement or praise, he pressed forward. Every second mattered. If he stopped, fear would catch up. If he slowed down, the enemy would recover their control of the field. The second nest sat farther uphill, protected by sandbags and reinforced timber. Its position allowed it to rake the entire slope below, an almost perfect killing zone. The soldiers pinned behind him could only watch. From their perspective, he was a lone figure crawling through chaos, advancing where entire units had failed. They wanted to help, to cover him, but their weapons were useless against the angle and distance. All they could do was pray he kept moving. The ground ahead offered little protection. Shell craters were shallow, the grass shredded by gunfire. Every movement risked exposure. Bullets snapped overhead, slamming into dirt and stone. The sound was relentless, metal tearing through air, striking earth with violent force. He reached a crater and paused, not from fear but to listen. Between bursts of fire, he identified the machine gun's rhythm. Short bursts, a brief pause. Then fire again. He counted silently, syncing his movement to the weapon's pattern. When the gun paused, he moved. When it fired, he pressed flat against the ground. Closer, closer. At 20 meters, he pulled another grenade from his gear. His hands were steady, despite the chaos around him. Training took over. Timing was everything now. The moment came. He rose from the crater and sprinted forward, closing the remaining distance in a heartbeat. The machine gunner saw him too late. A burst of fire ripped past his shoulder as he hurled the grenade with every ounce of strength he had. It landed inside the nest. The explosion shattered wood, sandbags, and steel. The gun fell silent, smoke rising where death had stood moments before. 2 nests destroyed. The battlefield shifted again. From behind, his unit began to move. Soldiers rose from cover, advancing cautiously as hope turned into momentum. Shouts of encouragement rang out, though he could not hear them. His focus was locked on the final objective. The third machine gun nest. This one was different. It sat higher than the others, partially hidden behind terrain, with a clear view of the entire field. It had survived artillery, infantry assaults, and now 2 direct grenade attacks. Its crew was experienced and alert. They had seen what happened, and they were waiting. As he moved toward it, the fire intensified. Bullets tore through the ground around him, closer now, more accurate. The enemy was tracking him. He zigzagged between debris, using smoke and confusion to mask his approach. But the distance felt endless. Halfway there, an explosion knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. Dirt filled his mouth. For a moment, the world faded into noise and smoke. Pain surged through his body, sharp and unforgiving. This was the moment many soldiers would stay down. He did not. Slowly, he pushed himself up. Blood ran from a wound on his arm, but he ignored it. There was no time to assess damage. The machine gun was still firing. His unit was still advancing, and still vulnerable. He adjusted his grip on his final grenades. The third nest was only meters away now. German voices shouted inside it. Orders, panic, confusion. They knew he was coming. The gun roared non-stop, spraying bullets in a desperate attempt to stop the inevitable. He lunged forward. At point-blank range, he threw the grenade. Then another. The explosions overlapped, tearing through the nest with devastating force. The machine gun fell silent at last, replaced by smoke, debris, and an eerie calm. 3 machine gun nests, 1 soldier. The advance succeeded. The German defensive line collapsed soon after, unable to recover from the sudden loss of its strongest positions. What had been a killing field became a breakthrough. And only then, only after the battle was won, did the weight of what he had done begin to settle in. When the last machine gun fell silent, the battlefield did not erupt in celebration. It never does. Instead, there was an unsettling quiet, broken only by distant artillery and the low groans of the wounded. Smoke drifted across the torn ground, and the smell of burned metal and earth hung heavy in the air. Soldiers advanced carefully now, stepping over shattered equipment and the remains of what had been an unbreakable defense just minutes earlier. He stood near the destroyed third nest, breathing heavily. Only now did his body begin to register the pain. His arm throbbed where shrapnel had torn into it. His legs felt weak, as if the ground itself were pulling him down. Adrenaline, which had carried him through fire and chaos, slowly faded. Each breath burned his chest, and his vision swam. Medics reached him first. They stared in disbelief, not because he was wounded, but because he was still standing. As they bandaged his arm and checked for more injuries, word spread quickly through the unit. Soldiers whispered his name. Others simply shook their heads, trying to process what they had just witnessed. 3 machine gun nests alone. Because of his actions, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of lives had been spared. The breakthrough allowed the entire unit to advance, securing a position that had previously seemed impossible to take. Commanders later admitted that without his decision, the attack might have failed completely. But in that moment, none of that mattered to him. He did not celebrate. He did not boast. He asked only one question. Did we make it through? The answer was yes. In the hours that followed, the battlefield was secured. The wounded were evacuated. The fallen were accounted for. War, relentless as ever, moved on to the next objective. Yet his actions could not be ignored. Officers took notes, reports were written. Eyewitness accounts poured in, each one describing the same unbelievable truth: how a single soldier had advanced under heavy fire and eliminated 3 fortified positions on his own. Higher command took notice. Recognition in wartime is complicated. Acts of bravery are weighed against countless others, and many heroes are never acknowledged. But this was different. This was undeniable. When the recommendation for a high military honor was submitted, it was backed by multiple witnesses, clear results, and undeniable impact. The language used in the report was simple but powerful, emphasizing initiative, fearlessness, and complete disregard for personal safety in the face of overwhelming danger. He was awarded one of the highest honors a soldier could receive. The ceremony, however, was brief. There were no grand speeches on the battlefield, no dramatic music, just a handshake, a medal placed on his uniform, and a quiet nod of respect from those who understood the cost of what he had done. He accepted it without emotion. To him, it was not about medals. It was about the men behind him, the ones who would go home because he moved forward when no one else could. As the war continued, his reputation grew. Among his fellow soldiers, he became a symbol, not of invincibility, but of resolve. When situations seemed impossible, someone would inevitably say, "If he could do it, we can hold on." Yet legends often come with a burden. He was still sent into combat, still faced danger, still bled like everyone else. The label of walking grenade followed him, whispered by both enemies and allies. To the Germans, he was a terrifying force. To his comrades, he was reassurance made human. But inside, he remained unchanged. He did not see himself as extraordinary. He believed he had simply done what the moment required. In his mind, hesitation would have cost lives, and action was the only acceptable choice. When the war finally ended, he returned home carrying memories no medal could erase. The sounds of machine gun fire did not fade easily. The faces of those lost stayed with him. Like many veterans, he rarely spoke of what he had done. History would remember the act. He remembered the cost. And decades later, long after the battlefield had returned to silence, his story remained. Passed down not as a tale of violence, but as an example of how one person's courage can change the fate of many. History does not always remember battles by the number of soldiers involved. Sometimes It remembers a single moment, and the man who refused to step back. Long after the guns fell silent, after maps were redrawn and uniforms were folded away, the story of the walking grenade remained, not because of the destruction he caused, but because of the lives he saved by moving forward when retreat would have been easier. Military historians would later analyze the engagement in detail. They would speak of terrain, angles of fire, and tactical breakthroughs. They would explain how eliminating 3 machine gun nests in rapid succession shattered a defensive line and opened the way for a successful advance. But none of that fully captured the human reality of the moment. What mattered most was not the strategy. It was the decision. A decision made under fire. A decision made alone. Veterans who fought alongside him remembered that day clearly. Some would say they saw fear in his eyes. Others insisted they saw only determination. Perhaps it was both. Courage, after all, is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. In reunions years later, former soldiers spoke of him with quiet respect. They did not exaggerate, they did not romanticize. They simply told the truth. When the line was breaking, one man moved forward and changed everything. The enemy remembered him too. Captured documents and post-war accounts revealed that German units began warning each other about lone attackers, soldiers who moved fast, threw grenades with deadly precision, and seemed impossible to stop. The nickname "walking grenade" spread not as propaganda, but as fear made into words. Yet for all the legends, the man himself lived simply. He returned to civilian life carrying invisible weight. Like many who had seen the worst of war, he found it difficult to explain his experiences to those who had not been there. He rarely spoke of medals or honors. When asked about that day, he often changed the subject or spoke briefly, focusing not on himself, but on his fellow soldiers. To him, survival was shared. As years passed, new generations grew up far removed from the chaos of World War II. Technology advanced. The world changed. But the lesson of that moment remained timeless. One person can matter, not because they are fearless, not because they are stronger than others, but because, in a critical moment, they choose responsibility over self-preservation. Today, his story is studied not only in military history, but in leadership, ethics, and human psychology. It serves as a reminder that extraordinary actions often come from ordinary people placed in impossible situations. The walking grenade was not a weapon. He was a man who understood that sometimes the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the risk of moving forward. As the final echoes of that battlefield faded into history, one truth remained unshaken. Courage does not announce itself. It reveals itself quietly, decisively, and forever. And in the end, that is why his story still matters. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who respects real history and real courage. And don't forget to comment below where you're watching from, because these stories belong to all of us.